The grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Wealthy guests in expensive suits and designer dresses walked around holding wine glasses. The annual charity gala was the biggest event of the year in the city. Everyone who was someone had come to show their face and donate money. Marcus Wellington sat at the VIP table near the stage. He was a real estate millionaire who owned half the buildings downtown. His gray hair was perfectly styled, and his custom-made suit probably cost more than most people earned in a month. Marcus loved these events because they gave him a chance to show off his wealth and make business connections. Next to the stage stood a beautiful grand piano. It was supposed to be the highlight of the evening. A famous pianist from Europe was scheduled to perform, but there was a problem. The pianist had missed his flight and would not arrive on time. The event organizer was running around in panic, trying to figure out what to do. Marcus noticed the chaos and called the organizer over to his table. The man was sweating and looked very stressed. Marcus asked what was wrong, and the organizer explained the situation. Without the piano performance, the evening would fall flat. Many guests had come specifically to hear the music. Marcus smiled in a way that made people uncomfortable. He had an idea, but it was not a kind one. He looked around the room and spotted a young waiter carrying a tray of champagne glasses. The waiter was maybe 25 years old, with dark hair and a thin frame. His uniform was clean but clearly worn from many washes. His name tag read Daniel. The millionaire snapped his fingers and pointed at Daniel. He told the organizer to bring that waiter over immediately. The organizer looked confused but did as he was told. Daniel came over nervously, still holding his tray. He had no idea why the richest man in the room wanted to speak with him. Marcus looked Daniel up and down with a smirk on his face. He announced loudly enough for nearby tables to hear that he had found the solution to their problem. Daniel would play the piano for them. The young waiter's eyes went wide with shock. He tried to explain that he was just a waiter and did not know how to play piano properly. But Marcus was not interested in excuses. He stood up and made his voice even louder so more people could hear. He said it would be entertaining to see what a simple waiter could do with such an expensive instrument. Some guests started laughing. They thought Marcus was making a joke to lighten the mood about the missing pianist. Daniel felt his face turn red with embarrassment. He tried again to say that this was not a good idea. He admitted he had taken some piano lessons many years ago as a child, but that was all. He was not a performer. He was just trying to work his shift and earn his paycheck. Marcus pulled out his wallet and placed $500 bills on the table. He said this money would be Daniel's tip if he played just one song on the piano. If Daniel refused, Marcus would speak to the hotel manager and make sure the waiter lost his job tonight. The threat hung in the air like a dark cloud. The other guests at nearby tables were now watching with great interest. Some looked uncomfortable with how Marcus was treating the waiter. Others seemed amused by the whole situation. They whispered to each other, wondering what would happen next. Daniel looked at the money on the table. $500 was a lot for him. That was more than he made in 2 weeks of hard work. But it was not really about the money anymore. It was about being humiliated in front of hundreds of wealthy people who already looked down on service workers. The hotel manager appeared, drawn by the commotion. Marcus explained the situation to him. The manager looked at Daniel with an expression that said he had no choice. The hotel needed to keep Marcus Wellington happy. He was a regular customer who spent thousands of dollars here and brought his rich friends. Daniel felt trapped. If he refused, he would lose his job. If he agreed, he would embarrass himself in front of everyone. His hands started shaking slightly. He had not played piano seriously in over 15 years. The last time was at his grandmother's house before she passed away. Marcus grew impatient and raised his voice again. He told Daniel to stop wasting everyone's time and get to the piano. The entire ballroom was now watching the scene unfold. Conversation stopped. People turned their chairs to get a better view. They sensed drama and wanted to see what would happen. With his heart pounding in his chest, Daniel slowly put down his tray on a nearby stand. He walked toward the grand piano on the stage. Each step felt heavy. His mind raced with memories of childhood piano lessons and his grandmother's gentle encouragement. She had always told him he had a special gift, but life had taken him in a different direction. He reached the piano bench and sat down carefully. The smooth wooden surface was cold under his fingers as he lifted the keyboard cover. The black and white keys seemed to glow under the stage lights. Daniel took a deep breath and tried to calm his nerves. Marcus sat back down at his table with a satisfied grin. He crossed his arms and waited for the entertainment to begin. He expected the waiter to stumble through a simple children's song, maybe Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or something equally basic. That would give everyone a good laugh. The ballroom fell completely silent. 300 pairs of eyes focused on the young waiter sitting at the expensive grand piano. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. In his mind, he was back in his grandmother's living room. He could almost smell her perfume and hear her voice telling him to play from his heart, not just his fingers. Daniel placed his hands on the keys and paused. This was the moment that would change everything, though nobody in that room knew it yet. Not Marcus Wellington with his cruel smile, not the worried hotel manager, not the curious guests holding their breath in anticipation. Nobody could have predicted what was about to happen next. Daniel's fingers touched the piano keys and suddenly everything changed. The first notes that came out were not the clumsy sounds of an amateur. They were clear, powerful, and filled with emotion. He began playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, one of the most beautiful and difficult pieces in classical music. The transformation was immediate and shocking. Daniel's entire body language shifted. The nervous, embarrassed waiter disappeared. In his place sat a true musician who knew exactly what he was doing. His fingers moved across the keys with incredible speed and precision. Each note was perfect, flowing into the next like water in a stream. Marcus Wellington's smile vanished from his face. He sat up straighter in his chair, his eyes wide with surprise. This was not what he expected at all. The smug satisfaction he felt moments ago turned into confusion. How could a waiter play like this? Around the ballroom, guests stopped whispering. Champagne glasses were set down on tables. People who had been laughing now sat in stunned silence. The music filled every corner of the room, touching something deep inside everyone who heard it. Some guests felt tears forming in their eyes, though they did not fully understand why. The hotel manager stood frozen near the wall. His mouth hung open slightly as he watched Daniel's hands dance across the piano. He had worked at this hotel for 20 years and had seen many talented performers on that stage. But there was something different about this performance. It was raw and real in a way that professional concerts sometimes were not. Daniel played with his eyes half closed, lost in the music. Every note carried a piece of his story. The struggles of working double shifts to pay rent, the dreams he had given up to survive, the pain of losing his grandmother, who had been his biggest supporter. All of it poured out through his fingers and into the air. As the piece continued, people started pulling out their phones. They wanted to record this unexpected moment. A simple waiter playing piano like a concertmaster was not something you saw every day. Within minutes, people were already posting videos on social media with captions full of shock and amazement. At Marcus's table, his business partners exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had watched their friend try to humiliate a working-class person for entertainment. Now that same person was showing incredible talent that none of them possessed despite all their money and education. It made them question what kind of man Marcus really was. The music grew more intense. Daniel's hands moved faster, hitting complex chords that required years of practice to master. His body swayed slightly with the rhythm. Sweat formed on his forehead, not from nervousness but from the physical effort of playing such a demanding piece. Every muscle in his arms and shoulders worked together in perfect harmony. An elderly woman at a front table had tears streaming down her face. She was a retired music teacher who had spent 50 years teaching children to play piano. She knew immediately that she was witnessing something special. This young man did not just know how to play the notes, he understood the soul of the music. Marcus tried to maintain his composure, but his face had turned slightly red. Other guests were starting to look at him with different expressions now. Not admiration for his wealth and power, but something closer to disgust. He had tried to embarrass this waiter as a cruel joke, and it had completely backfired on him. The charity event organizer stood near the stage with his hand over his mouth. He was simultaneously thrilled and shocked. The missing European pianist would have been good, certainly. But this performance had something extra. It had a story behind it that made the music even more powerful. His gala would be talked about for years because of this moment. Daniel played on, unaware of all the reactions around him. In his mind, he was playing for his grandmother. He remembered her small apartment filled with old furniture and family photos. The upright piano in the corner that was slightly out of tune. She would sit next to him for hours, patiently teaching him scales and techniques. She had seen potential in him that nobody else did. When other family members said piano was a waste of time, she defended his lessons. She used her limited pension money to pay for his music education. She believed he could be great if given the chance. But after she died, Daniel had to drop out of music school. He needed to work full-time to support himself and pay for her funeral. The nocturne reached its most delicate section. Daniel's touch became incredibly soft and gentle. The notes floated through the air like feathers falling slowly to the ground. This part required perfect control and sensitivity. Too loud and it would lose its magic. Too soft and nobody would hear it. Daniel played it exactly right. A young couple at a middle table held hands tightly. The music had transported them back to their own wedding day. Another guest remembered his father, who had passed away last year. Music had a strange power to unlock memories and emotions that people kept buried deep inside. Marcus Wellington's wife, who had been sitting quietly beside him, reached over and touched his arm. She whispered something in his ear, but he did not respond. He just stared at Daniel with a mixture of emotions crossing his face. Shame, perhaps, certainly surprise, maybe even a hint of respect that he did not want to feel. The piano's sound filled the enormous ballroom as if the instrument itself had come alive. The Steinway grand piano was worth over $200,000, and Daniel was making it sing in ways it rarely did. Every technical feature of the expensive instrument was being used to its fullest potential by his skilled hands. Waiters and waitresses who worked at the event had stopped serving. They stood along the walls watching their colleague with pride and amazement. They knew Daniel as a quiet, hard-working guy who always helped others and never complained. None of them had any idea he could play like this. As the piece moved toward its conclusion, Daniel opened his eyes fully. He looked out at the audience for the first time since starting. What he saw surprised him. Hundreds of people completely captivated by his performance, phones recording him from every angle, faces showing genuine emotion and appreciation. This was nothing like the mockery and laughter he expected. His confidence grew stronger. His back straightened. His fingers pressed the keys with even more authority. He was not just a waiter anymore. Not in this moment. He was a pianist sharing his gift with people who actually wanted to hear it. The fear and embarrassment melted away completely. Marcus Wellington sat very still in his chair. His cruel plan had gone terribly wrong. He wanted to create a funny moment at a poor waiter's expense. Instead, he had given this young man a stage to reveal his extraordinary talent. The millionaire had exposed himself as a bully, while the waiter had shown himself to be something much more valuable than rich. The final notes of the nocturne floated through the ballroom like a gentle goodbye. Daniel played the last chord and let it fade naturally into silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The room was completely still as the final sound vibrations disappeared into the air. Then the applause began. It started with one person, then two, then suddenly everyone was on their feet. The entire ballroom erupted in thunderous clapping and cheering. People were shouting, "Bravo!" and whistling with their fingers. Some guests had tears running down their faces. Others just shook their heads in disbelief at what they had witnessed. Daniel sat at the piano bench, slightly dazed. He had not expected this reaction. His hands were still resting on the keys as he tried to process what had just happened. The last time anyone applauded his piano playing was at a small recital when he was 16 years old. That was a room of maybe 30 people. This was hundreds of wealthy strangers giving him a standing ovation. The elderly music teacher rushed toward the stage as fast as her old legs could carry her. She climbed the steps carefully and made her way to Daniel. With tears in her eyes, she grabbed his hands and told him that was the most beautiful performance she had heard in decades. She wanted to know where he studied and why he was working as a waiter instead of performing in concert halls. Daniel stood up from the bench, overwhelmed by the attention. He tried to explain his story, but his voice caught in his throat. The emotions of the moment hit him all at once. The fear he felt minutes ago, the memories of his grandmother, the years of working hard jobs while his musical dreams faded. It all came crashing down on him at the same time. More people crowded around the stage. A famous conductor who was attending the gala pushed through the crowd. He handed Daniel his business card and said they needed to talk about future opportunities. A woman who owned an art gallery wanted to organize a special performance at her venue. A music producer pulled out his phone to exchange contact information. Meanwhile, Marcus Wellington remained seated at his table. The applause continued around him, but he did not join in. His face was a deep shade of red now, though not from anger. It was embarrassment and shame. His wife had stopped looking at him. His business partners were whispering to each other while glancing in his direction. One of Marcus's friends at the table finally spoke up. He said what everyone was thinking. That was incredibly cruel what Marcus did, trying to humiliate that young man. It backfired completely and made Marcus look like a terrible person. The friend suggested Marcus should apologize publicly before the situation got even worse for his reputation. But Marcus was not used to apologizing. He was used to people apologizing to him. His pride was wounded, and he did not know how to handle the situation. He grabbed his wine glass and took a long drink, trying to think of a way to save face in front of all these people. Up on the stage, the hotel manager had made his way to Daniel. The manager's entire attitude had changed. Earlier, he was ready to fire Daniel to keep Marcus happy. Now he was practically begging Daniel not to quit. He promised a raise and better shifts. He said the hotel would be honored to have such a talented person on their staff. Daniel politely thanked the manager but did not commit to anything. His mind was spinning with possibilities. These important people surrounding him were offering opportunities he never thought possible. A chance to perform professionally, to record music, to maybe finally live the life his grandmother dreamed for him. The event organizer climbed onto the stage and spoke into a microphone. He announced that this was the most incredible moment in the history of their annual gala. He asked everyone to give Daniel another round of applause, which they eagerly did. The organizer then put his arm around Daniel and declared that the charity would receive even more donations tonight because people were so inspired by what they witnessed. Social media was exploding with videos of Daniel's performance. People who were not even at the event were watching the clips and sharing them with amazed comments. Within an hour, the video had been viewed over 50,000 times. By the next morning, it would reach millions. Hashtags like waiter pianist and hidden talent were trending across multiple platforms. A journalist from the local newspaper approached Daniel for an interview. She wanted to write a feature story about him. What was his background? How did he learn to play so beautifully? Why was he working as a waiter? Daniel answered her questions honestly, his voice still shaky with emotion. He told her about his grandmother, about music school, about the financial struggles that forced him to give up his dreams. As Daniel spoke to the journalist, Marcus Wellington finally stood up from his table. He walked slowly toward the stage, his steps heavy. His wife watched him go with a worried expression. She was not sure what her husband was about to do, but she hoped he would do the right thing for once. The crowd around the stage noticed Marcus approaching. Some people stepped back to let him through. Others whispered and pointed. Everyone remembered how this whole thing started with his cruel challenge. They wondered if the millionaire would have the courage to admit he was wrong. Marcus reached the edge of the stage and stood there looking up at Daniel. Their eyes met, the young waiter and the wealthy businessman staring at each other across a divide much bigger than the few feet of physical space between them. One man had money and power. The other had talent and humility. In that moment, it was clear which was more valuable. The ballroom grew quiet again as people sensed another dramatic moment coming. Phones were raised to record whatever would happen next. Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. He was not used to being humiliated. He was the one who usually had control of every situation. Daniel stood calmly on the stage, waiting to see what Marcus would do. He felt different now compared to earlier in the evening. The performance had reminded him of who he really was beneath the waiter's uniform. He was not just a server bringing food and drinks to rich people. He was an artist with real skills and something meaningful to offer the world. The old music teacher stood protectively near Daniel, as if ready to defend him if Marcus said anything cruel again. The conductor and the gallery owner also remained close, showing their support. These strangers had become allies in a matter of minutes, united by their appreciation for genuine talent. Marcus finally found his voice. He cleared his throat and began to speak. But before he could get more than a few words out, his phone started buzzing in his pocket. Then it buzzed again, and again. Multiple people were calling and texting him. Something was happening, and it was happening fast. He pulled out his phone and his face went pale as he scrolled through the notifications. The videos of Daniel playing piano were everywhere online. And in every video, in every comment section, people were talking about the rich man who tried to embarrass a waiter. Marcus Wellington's name was being shared along with the clips. People were calling him a bully. Some were even finding his business information and leaving negative reviews. His reputation, which he cared about so deeply, was being destroyed in real time, all because of his own cruel actions. The internet had decided who the villain was in this story, and it was definitely not the talented young waiter standing on that stage. Marcus stared at his phone screen in horror. His assistant was calling repeatedly. His public relations team was sending urgent messages. News outlets were requesting comments about the viral video. Everything was falling apart. He looked up at Daniel with a very different expression now. The smugness was completely gone, replaced by panic and desperation. The millionaire knew he had to do something immediately to control the damage. He climbed onto the stage without asking permission. The crowd murmured in surprise. Marcus approached the microphone and tapped it to get everyone's attention. The room fell silent once more, though this time the energy was different. People were suspicious and curious about what he would say. Marcus spoke into the microphone, his voice not as confident as usual. He said he wanted to make a statement. He claimed that his challenge to Daniel was meant to discover hidden talent, not to humiliate anyone. He was testing the young man to see if he had what it takes to perform under pressure. It was all part of his plan to help talented people get opportunities, he insisted. Several guests rolled their eyes at this obvious lie. They had all heard the mocking tone in Marcus's voice earlier. They saw the cruel smile on his face when he forced Daniel to the piano. Now he was trying to rewrite history and make himself look like some kind of generous patron of the arts. It was pathetic and nobody was buying it. Daniel stood a few feet away, watching Marcus spin his false narrative. The young waiter could have exposed the lie right there. He could have told everyone exactly what Marcus said and how he threatened Daniel's job. But something stopped him. Maybe it was his grandmother's voice in his head telling him to take the high road. Maybe he just wanted this night to be about music, not drama. Marcus continued talking, saying he would personally donate $50,000 to the charity in Daniel's honor. He also offered to sponsor Daniel's musical career and help him get back into formal training. The crowd reacted with polite applause, but it felt forced. People clapped because a large donation was made, not because they believed Marcus's story. The millionaire then turned to Daniel and extended his hand for a handshake. It was a calculated move designed to create a photo opportunity. If pictures showed them shaking hands and smiling, maybe the online narrative could be changed. Maybe people would believe this was all a misunderstanding or even a setup for something positive. Daniel looked at the outstretched hand. Everything in him wanted to refuse it. This man had tried to humiliate him in front of hundreds of people just for entertainment. The donation and the offer of sponsorship were not coming from kindness. They were coming from fear. Fear of losing business deals. Fear of being known as a bully. Fear of public consequences. But Daniel also understood something that Marcus did not. This moment was bigger than both of them now. Millions of people would see whatever happened next. If Daniel refused the handshake and exposed Marcus's lies, it might feel satisfying in the moment. But it would also make the story about revenge and conflict, instead of about music and second chances. After a long pause, Daniel stepped forward and shook Marcus's hand. The crowd applauded more genuinely this time, relieved that the tension was breaking. Cameras flashed and phones recorded the handshake from every angle. Marcus smiled widely for the photos, clearly relieved. Daniel's smile was more subtle and genuine, though it did not quite reach his eyes. The music teacher approached the microphone next. She introduced herself as Professor Margaret Chen from the Riverside Conservatory of Music. She announced that the conservatory was offering Daniel a full scholarship to complete his musical education. The entire ballroom erupted in even louder applause and cheering. This was the kind of support that actually mattered. More offers followed. The conductor invited Daniel to perform as a guest soloist with the city orchestra next month. The gallery owner confirmed she would host his debut solo concert. A streaming platform representative who was at the gala offered to produce a documentary about his life story. Opportunity after opportunity poured in, each one more exciting than the last. Daniel felt overwhelmed, but in a good way this time. These were real chances to build a career in music. Not because someone felt sorry for him or was trying to save their reputation, but because people recognized his talent and wanted to support it. This was what his grandmother always hoped would happen if he just got the right opportunity. The hotel manager announced that the hotel would be proud to sponsor Daniel's first concert by providing the venue free of charge. He also promoted Daniel on the spot, saying the young man could work flexible hours that would not interfere with his music studies and performances. The manager was smart enough to realize that having a famous pianist on staff, even part-time, would be great publicity for the hotel. Marcus stood off to the side now, no longer the center of attention. His wife approached him and whispered something in his ear. She did not look happy. Other guests who had been at his VIP table were leaving without saying goodbye. The social and business consequences of his actions were already beginning, regardless of how he tried to spin the story. Meanwhile, Daniel was surrounded by people wanting to talk to him. Some wanted selfies. Others wanted to discuss collaboration opportunities. A few just wanted to tell him how much his performance moved them. He handled it all with grace and genuine appreciation, thanking everyone for their kind words and support. The journalist finished her notes and promised her article would run in tomorrow's newspaper. She already had a great headline in mind about hidden talent being discovered in the most unexpected way. The story would focus on Daniel's journey and his grandmother's influence, with only a brief mention of how the performance came about. As the crowd around Daniel finally thinned, the elderly Professor Chen pulled him aside. She spoke to him privately, her voice full of emotion. She told him that real talent could not stay hidden forever. It always found a way to emerge, usually when you least expected it. Tonight was his emergence, and she would do everything in her power to make sure he reached his full potential. Daniel felt tears forming in his eyes again. He thanked the professor and told her about his grandmother who believed in him when nobody else did. Professor Chen smiled and said grandmothers have a special wisdom about such things. She promised that she would treat him like family at the conservatory and make sure he got the education he deserved. The gala eventually returned to its normal activities. People went back to eating, drinking, and socializing, but the energy in the room had changed. Everyone knew they had witnessed something special. This would not be just another forgettable charity event. This was the night a waiter became a sensation. Daniel finally made his way to a quiet corner to catch his breath. He pulled out his old phone and looked at a photo of his grandmother on the lock screen. She was smiling in the picture, sitting at her upright piano. He whispered a quiet thank you to her memory. She set him on this path so many years ago, and tonight her belief in him was finally validated. A young waitress who worked with Daniel approached him shyly. She had tears in her eyes. She told him that watching his performance gave her hope. She was also pursuing a dream outside of work, trying to become a writer. Seeing him succeed made her believe that maybe people like them could actually make their dreams come true. Daniel encouraged her to keep writing and never give up. He realized that his story was not just about him anymore. It was about everyone who had been overlooked or underestimated because of their circumstances. Everyone who had talent and dreams but felt trapped by financial necessity. His success could inspire others to keep pushing forward. As the evening wore on, Marcus Wellington left the gala early. His wife walked several steps ahead of him, clearly upset. His attempt to control the narrative had only partially worked. The donation would help his public image somewhat, but people would always remember this as the night he tried to humiliate a waiter and got shown up instead. The next morning, Daniel woke up in his small apartment to find his phone exploding with notifications. He had received over 3,000 new followers on his rarely used social media accounts overnight. His inbox was full of messages from strangers around the world, telling him how much his story inspired them. The videos of his performance had been viewed over 5 million times across different platforms. He sat on the edge of his bed, scrolling through the messages in disbelief. People from Japan, Brazil, France, and dozens of other countries had watched him play. Comments came in multiple languages, all expressing the same sentiment. They were moved by his talent and his story. They were angry at how he was treated, but proud of how he handled himself with dignity. The local newspaper's website had published the journalist's article with a front-page feature. The headline read, "From serving tables to standing ovations, the waiter who stunned a gala." The article told his complete story, including details about his grandmother and his financial struggles. It painted Marcus Wellington in a very unflattering light, describing him as a wealthy bully who underestimated the wrong person. Major news networks picked up the story. By noon, Daniel was receiving calls from television producers wanting him to appear on morning shows and talk programs. A famous late-night host wanted him as a musical guest. A documentary filmmaker reached out about doing an extended piece on working-class artists, pursuing their dreams against all odds. Daniel felt grateful but also anxious. Just yesterday he was invisible, serving champagne to people who never looked at his face. Now the entire world seemed interested in everything about him. It was exciting but also terrifying. He worried about losing his privacy and his simple life. He worried about disappointing all these people who suddenly believed in him. His phone rang again. This time it was Professor Chen from the conservatory. She wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss his scholarship and create a personalized study plan. She also mentioned that several donors had contacted the school offering additional financial support, specifically for Daniel. His education would be fully covered, including living expenses so he could focus entirely on music. After the call, Daniel walked to his grandmother's old upright piano in the corner of his apartment. He had kept it after she passed away, even though it took up most of his living space. He sat down and played a few notes. The piano was old and imperfect, but it held so many memories. This was where his journey really began, long before that fancy ballroom and that grand Steinway. Later that day, Daniel met with Professor Chen at the conservatory. The campus was beautiful, with practice rooms where students could be heard playing various instruments. Walking through the halls, Daniel felt like he was entering a world he thought he had lost forever. The professor showed him the performance hall where he would eventually give recitals. She introduced him to faculty members who would become his teachers. During the campus tour, several students recognized Daniel from the viral videos. They asked for photos and told him how cool it was that he was joining the conservatory. Some of them came from wealthy families and had never struggled financially, but they respected his talent and his story. It felt like the beginning of a new chapter where he would be valued for his abilities, not judged by his bank account. Meanwhile, Marcus Wellington was dealing with very different consequences. His phone was also flooded with messages, but they were not supportive. Business partners were questioning his character. Some clients were reconsidering their contracts with his company. The board of directors of several organizations where he held positions were receiving complaints demanding his removal. His wife had barely spoken to him since the gala. She was embarrassed by his behavior and tired of making excuses for him. Their grown children called, disappointed by the videos they saw online. Even Marcus's elderly mother phoned to express her shame at how he treated a young person just trying to earn a living. The people whose opinions he actually cared about were all turning against him. A crisis management team worked overtime to try to repair Marcus's public image. They drafted apology statements and pitched positive stories to friendly media outlets. But the internet had already made up its mind. Marcus Wellington was the villain of the story. His $50,000 donation was seen as blood money, an attempt to buy his way out of consequences rather than genuine remorse. Some of Marcus's real estate deals started falling apart. Investors did not want to be associated with someone who had become a symbol of wealthy arrogance and cruelty. A major development project lost 3 key partners in 1 week. His company's stock value dropped. The financial impact of one cruel moment was adding up quickly, proving that reputation matters even for the rich. Daniel, unaware of Marcus's troubles, was preparing for his first official performance with the city orchestra. The conductor who had given him his card at the gala was true to his word. They scheduled a special concert featuring Daniel as the guest pianist. The event sold out within 3 hours of tickets going on sale. People wanted to hear the waiter pianist play live. As Daniel practiced for the concert, news outlets continued following both stories. They contrasted Daniel's rising success with Marcus's falling reputation. Think pieces were written about class, respect, and how society treats service workers. The incident became a cultural moment, sparking larger conversations about wealth inequality and human dignity. A week before the concert, Daniel received an unexpected visitor at his apartment. It was Marcus Wellington. The millionaire looked different than he did at the gala. His expensive suit was replaced with casual clothes. His confident posture was gone, replaced by slumped shoulders and tired eyes. He asked if they could talk privately. Daniel hesitated but let him in. Marcus sat in the small living room that was barely a fraction of the size of any room in his mansion. He looked around at Daniel's humble home and seemed to truly see the struggle that he had mocked. The cheap furniture, the old appliances, the lack of luxury that Marcus took for granted every day of his life. Marcus spoke quietly, very different from his loud, commanding voice at the gala. He said he came to apologize properly, away from cameras and microphones. He admitted that what he did was cruel and inexcusable. He was not testing Daniel's talent or trying to help him. He was simply being mean because he could, because he had power and thought there would be no consequences. Daniel listened without interrupting. Marcus continued, explaining that the past week had been the worst of his life. He lost business deals and friendships. His family was disappointed in him. But worse than all of that, he had to look at himself in the mirror and recognize that he had become the kind of person he used to despise. Somewhere along the way, his wealth and success had turned him into a bully. The millionaire said he was not asking for forgiveness or even understanding. He just wanted Daniel to know that what happened changed him. Seeing someone with so much talent and so little opportunity made him realize how much privilege he wasted on being cruel instead of helpful. He wished he could take back that night. But since he could not, he wanted to at least take responsibility without hiding behind donations or publicity. Daniel studied Marcus's face as he spoke. The man seemed genuinely remorseful, though it was hard to know if the regret came from being caught or from actual personal growth. Either way, Daniel appreciated that Marcus came here privately instead of making another public spectacle. Real apologies happened away from cameras, between the actual people involved. After Marcus finished speaking, Daniel responded honestly. He said the humiliation hurt deeply, especially because it reminded him of years of being looked down on because of his job and his financial situation. Service workers dealt with disrespect constantly from people who thought they were better because they had money. Marcus just happened to be the one who pushed hard enough to create a viral moment, but Daniel also said he was grateful in a strange way. If Marcus had not forced him to that piano, none of the current opportunities would exist. His grandmother used to say that sometimes blessings came disguised as challenges. That night was terrifying and embarrassing, but it also opened doors that Daniel thought were permanently closed. So while he did not excuse Marcus's behavior, he understood that good things could come from bad situations. Marcus listened to Daniel's words with visible emotion. He thanked the young man for even allowing him into his home to apologize. Before leaving, Marcus wrote down his personal phone number on a piece of paper. He told Daniel that if he ever needed anything for his musical career, anything at all, to please call. Not because Marcus was trying to buy forgiveness, but because helping talented people succeed was the right thing to do. After Marcus left, Daniel sat alone thinking about the strange turn his life had taken. One moment of forced courage had changed everything. He wondered what his grandmother would say if she could see all of this. She would probably laugh and say she always knew he was special. She would remind him to stay humble and remember where he came from, no matter how successful he became. The night of the orchestra concert finally arrived. The concert hall was packed with people from all walks of life. Wealthy patrons sat next to working-class fans who had saved money for tickets. The audience was more diverse than usual for such events. Daniel's story had attracted people who normally would never attend a classical music performance. Backstage, Daniel felt the familiar nervousness returning. But this time it was different from the gala. That night he was nervous because he was being humiliated. Tonight he was nervous because he cared about doing well. He wanted to honor this opportunity and prove that the viral moment was not just luck. He was a real musician with serious skill and dedication. Professor Chen came to the dressing room to check on him. She could see he was anxious and offered some encouraging words. She reminded him that he had already proven himself. Now he just needed to enjoy the experience and share his gift with people who genuinely wanted to hear it. The pressure he felt was self-imposed. Everyone in that audience was already on his side. The conductor gave Daniel a reassuring pat on the shoulder as they walked onto the stage together. The crowd erupted in applause the moment they saw Daniel. People stood and cheered before he even played a single note. Some held signs supporting him. Others wore shirts with phrases like hidden talent printed on them. The outpouring of support brought tears to Daniel's eyes. He sat at the piano and took several deep breaths. The orchestra members watched him with respect and encouragement. They were professional musicians who recognized his talent and were excited to perform with him. This was a collaboration, not a test. They were all working together to create something beautiful. The conductor raised his baton. The orchestra began playing the opening of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most beloved and challenging pieces in the classical repertoire. When Daniel's moment came to join in, his fingers found the keys with confidence. The nervousness melted away as soon as the music started flowing. For the next 30 minutes, Daniel and the orchestra created magic together. The concert hall's acoustics carried every note perfectly to the audience. People sat mesmerized, some with closed eyes just absorbing the sound. Others watched Daniel's hands move across the keys with athletic precision and artistic grace. The combination of power and delicacy in his playing was remarkable. During a particularly quiet section, you could hear people sniffling in the audience. The emotional depth of the music was reaching into hearts and pulling out feelings that had been buried. An elderly man in the front row thought about his late wife. A young mother held her daughter close, hoping to instill a love of music in the next generation. A teenager struggling with depression felt a moment of hope that beautiful things still existed in the world. As the concerto built toward its dramatic conclusion, the energy in the room intensified. Daniel played with increasing passion and strength. His body moved with the music, his face showing the emotional journey the piece demanded. The orchestra supported him perfectly, all the musicians working as one unified voice behind his solo performance. The final chord resonated through the hall and then silence. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds of complete quiet as the audience processed what they just experienced. Then the applause began like thunder. The entire crowd jumped to their feet instantly. The standing ovation lasted over 5 minutes, with people cheering and whistling and clapping until their hands hurt. Daniel stood and bowed, his face flushed with exertion and joy. The conductor shook his hand enthusiastically. The orchestra members tapped their instruments in the traditional musician's gesture of approval. Flowers were brought onto the stage. The audience simply would not stop applauding. They wanted Daniel to know how much his performance meant to them. He was called back for 3 curtain calls. Each time he returned to the stage, the applause renewed with equal intensity. People were crying openly now, not from sadness but from being so deeply moved. The performance was technically excellent, but it was also emotionally honest. Daniel played from a place of real experience, of struggle and hope and determination. That authenticity made all the difference. After the concert, Daniel met with fans at a reception. The line of people wanting to talk to him stretched across the lobby. He shook hands, signed programs, and posed for photos until his face hurt from smiling. Every person had something kind to say. Many told him their own stories of struggling to pursue dreams while working difficult jobs. His success gave them hope for their own journeys. Professor Chen observed from a distance with pride. She had taught hundreds of students over her long career, but few had Daniel's combination of natural talent and hard-earned wisdom. His difficult path had actually made him a better musician than he might have been if everything came easily. The pain in his playing was real because his life had real pain in it. A representative from a major recording label approached Daniel with a contract offer. They wanted to produce his first album and promote him internationally. The terms were generous, especially for a new artist. Daniel asked if he could have his lawyer review it before signing. The representative smiled and said that was exactly the smart response he hoped to hear. Daniel was not just talented, he was learning to protect himself in the business world. Among the crowd at the reception was someone unexpected. Marcus Wellington stood near the back, partially hidden behind a column. He had bought a ticket under a different name and sat in the upper balcony where nobody would recognize him. He wanted to hear Daniel play properly, in a real concert setting without all the drama and conflict of that fateful night. Marcus had been moved by the performance more than he expected. Watching Daniel succeed felt bittersweet. Part of him was genuinely happy for the young man, but another part felt deep regret about how things happened. If Marcus had been kinder that night, he could have been part of this success story as a supporter, instead of being remembered as the villain who had to be overcome. He decided not to approach Daniel at the reception. This was Daniel's moment, and Marcus did not want to create any awkward situation that might take attention away from the artist. Instead, he slipped out of the concert hall quietly. On his way out, he donated anonymously to the conservatory's scholarship fund. It was a small gesture compared to what he owed, but it was something. Daniel finally made it home late that night, exhausted but happier than he had been in years. He sat at his grandmother's old piano and played a simple melody she used to love. He told her about the concert and thanked her again for believing in him. Her piano might be old and out of tune, but it represented the foundation of everything. Good that was happening now. His phone buzzed with a text. Message from Professor Chen. She wanted to let him know that a prominent European music festival had invited him to perform next summer. They saw videos of tonight's concert and were impressed. This was becoming real. Daniel was not just a viral sensation anymore. He was being recognized as a legitimate classical musician with serious career potential. As he prepared for bed, Daniel reflected on how quickly life could change. 3 weeks ago, he was serving drinks and worried about making rent. Tonight, he performed with a professional orchestra in front of thousands of people. Next summer, he might be playing in Europe. It felt like a dream, but the exhaustion in his muscles from playing told him it was very real. 6 months passed, and Daniel's life transformed in ways he never imagined possible. He signed with the recording label and released his first album, featuring both classical pieces and some original compositions. The album reached the top 10 on classical music charts and received positive reviews from critics who praised his emotional depth and technical skill. The conservatory became his second home. He spent hours each day in practice rooms working with Professor Chen and other talented instructors. They helped him refine techniques and expand his repertoire. But more importantly, they encouraged him to develop his own artistic voice. They did not want him to just copy other pianists. They wanted him to become his own unique performer. Daniel continued working part-time at the hotel, though his role completely changed. The management created a special position for him where he would play piano in the hotel lounge several evenings a week. Guests would book rooms specifically to hear him perform. The hotel featured him in their marketing materials, and his presence attracted wealthy music lovers from around the world. His former co-workers at the hotel were proud of his success. They never treated him differently or became jealous. Instead, they celebrated with him and told everyone they knew that they worked alongside a famous musician. The waitress who wanted to be a writer actually finished her first novel and dedicated it to Daniel, thanking him for inspiring her to pursue her dream seriously. The documentary about Daniel's life premiered at a major film festival and was picked up by a streaming service. It told his complete story, from childhood piano lessons with his grandmother to the viral gala moment to his current success. The filmmakers interviewed Professor Chen, the conductor, several audience members from the concert, and even some of Daniel's former music school classmates who lost touch with him over the years. Interestingly, the documentary also included an interview with Marcus Wellington. The millionaire had agreed to participate and spoke honestly about his actions that night. He did not make excuses or try to rewrite history. He admitted he was cruel and explained how the experience forced him to examine his own character. The documentary showed his interview but made clear that the story was about Daniel's triumph, not Marcus's redemption. Marcus had indeed changed after that night, though not in any public or dramatic way. He quietly started a foundation that provided scholarships and financial support to talented young people from working-class backgrounds. He did not put his name on it or seek publicity. The foundation helped dozens of young artists, musicians, and students pursue their education without the financial stress that Daniel experienced. He never tried to take credit for Daniel's success or claim that his cruel challenge was somehow beneficial. Marcus understood that what he did was wrong, and Daniel succeeded despite him, not because of him. The best thing Marcus could do was help others, so they would not have to wait for a viral moment to get opportunities they deserved. Daniel performed at venues around the world. He played in Tokyo, Paris, London, and Sydney. Each performance sold out quickly. He became known not just for his technical ability, but for the genuine emotion he brought to every piece. Critics noted that his music had a quality of authenticity that came from real-life experience, not just sheltered practice rooms. Despite his growing fame, Daniel remained grounded. He bought a modest house with a music room where he kept his grandmother's old piano, alongside a new grand piano. He donated a portion of his earnings to music education programs in low-income schools.
He gave free master classes to students who could not afford expensive private lessons.
He remembered where he came from and wanted to help others on similar journeys. 1 year after the gala, the charity organization invited Daniel back for their annual event. This time he was the planned guest performer, not an embarrassed waiter forced onto the stage. He agreed to play, and the event sold out faster than any previous year. People wanted to return to where the story began and see how far Daniel had come. The night of the anniversary gala, Daniel arrived early. He stood alone in the ballroom looking at the stage and the piano. He remembered the fear he felt walking up those steps, the shame of being mocked, the way his hands trembled as he sat at the bench. It seemed like a lifetime ago, even though only 12 months had passed. When the performance time came, Daniel walked onto the stage to massive applause. The crowd included many of the same people who had witnessed the original moment. But the energy was completely different. They were there to celebrate an artist they admired, not to watch a spectacle. Daniel felt respected and valued in a way he never experienced before that transformative night. He sat at the piano and spoke into the microphone before playing. He thanked everyone who supported him over the past year. He mentioned Professor Chen, the conductor, the hotel staff, and all the strangers who shared his story and encouraged him online. He also acknowledged that his journey began with a difficult moment that taught him the importance of dignity, perseverance, and believing in yourself, even when others doubt you. Then Daniel played. He performed a new original composition he had written specifically for this occasion. The piece was called The Waiter's Dream, and it told his story through music. It started with uncertain, hesitant notes representing his struggle and doubt. Then it built into powerful, confident passages representing his growth and success. It ended with a gentle, grateful melody dedicated to his grandmother's memory. The audience listened with rapt attention. Some remembered watching the viral videos over and over, amazed by what they witnessed. Others were new fans who discovered Daniel through his album or concerts. But everyone in that room understood they were part of something special. They were witnessing not just a performance, but a celebration of human potential and the power of second chances. When the final notes faded, the standing ovation lasted even longer than it did at his first orchestra concert. People cheered and cried and celebrated together. The event raised more money for charity than any previous year. Daniel's presence had transformed the gala from just another fancy party into something meaningful and inspiring. After the performance, Daniel mingled with guests. Many wanted to tell him how his story impacted their lives. A young woman said she quit a job where she was disrespected and finally pursued her passion for photography. A middle-aged man started taking guitar lessons again after 30 years away from music. A teenager told his parents he wanted to go to music school instead of business school, and they agreed because they saw what was possible through Daniel's example. Late in the evening, as the gala was ending, Daniel returned to the piano one more time. He sat alone on the stage while the staff cleaned up around him. He played softly just for himself. He played the simple songs his grandmother taught him as a child. The basic scales and melodies that formed the foundation of everything he knew. A janitor sweeping the floor stopped to listen. He smiled at Daniel and said his playing was beautiful. Daniel thanked him and asked his name. They chatted briefly about life and work and dreams. Daniel learned that the janitor's daughter loved music and wanted to learn piano, but they could not afford lessons. Daniel wrote down his contact information and told the janitor to have his daughter call him. He would teach her for free, just like his grandmother did for him. As Daniel finally left the ballroom that night, he looked back one more time at the place where his life changed. The empty stage, the silent piano, the crystal chandeliers still sparkling overhead. Everything looked the same as it did that terrifying night 1 year ago. But Daniel was not the same at all. He was no longer just a waiter hoping for a better life. He was a successful musician living his dream. He was a teacher helping the next generation. He was proof that talent and determination could overcome circumstance and prejudice. He was exactly what his grandmother always believed he could be. Daniel walked out into the cool night air with a smile on his face. Tomorrow he would practice for his upcoming European tour. Next month he would record his second album. Next year, who knows what opportunities would come. But tonight he was simply grateful. Grateful for the struggle that made him strong. Grateful for the chance encounter that opened doors. Grateful for everyone who believed in him when he could not believe in himself. The viral video that started everything still existed online, viewed over 50 million times now. New people discovered it every day and felt inspired by the story. But for Daniel, the video was just a moment. What mattered was everything that came after. The hard work, the dedication, the choice to turn humiliation into motivation and pain into purpose. He got into his car and pulled out his phone to check messages. There was one from Professor Chen about an opportunity to perform at Carnegie Hall next year. Another from the recording label about international distribution of his album, and one from a friend asking if he wanted to grab coffee tomorrow and catch up. Daniel replied to the coffee invitation first. Because no matter how successful he became, he wanted to remember that the simple things mattered most. Friendship, kindness, staying connected to real life and real people. His music was important, but it was not everything. He was not just a pianist, he was a complete person with relationships and values that went beyond performances and applause. As he drove home that night, Daniel thought about his grandmother one more time. She never got to see any of this happen. She never knew that her sacrifice and belief would lead to sold-out concerts and international recognition. But somehow Daniel felt she knew anyway. Maybe she was watching from somewhere, smiling that knowing smile she always had, saying she told him so. The story that began with cruelty ended with triumph. The waiter who was forced to play piano became the musician who chose to share his gift with the world. And the moment that could have destroyed him became the moment that set him free. Sometimes life works in mysterious ways, Daniel thought. Sometimes the worst moments become the best ones. If you are brave enough to keep playing through the fear,